Welcome to the Matthew Moran podcast. Here you will find a series of in-depth conversations with the world's best nature photographers, filmmakers, conservationists, editors, writers, and publishers. You will get an insight into the lives of creative professionals and industry experts. It is a chance to hear their stories, personal journeys, and how they carve a niche to make a living. The podcast focuses on the role that photography and filmmaking plays in helping to raise awareness about the global plight of species, and despite the depressing statistics, we look for solutions of what we can all do to contribute to conservation. All my guests give up their precious time and are incredibly generous in spirit. So this is my chance to share these conversations with you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. My guest today is Britta Jaschinski. Britta is a multi-award-winning photojournalist and one of the founding members of the Photographers Against Wildlife Crime. Together with co-editor Keith Wilson, previous guest on this pod, the Photographers Against Wildlife Crime published a groundbreaking book with the aim of bringing an end to the wildlife trade. The book also features the work of previous guests Neil Aldridge and Joanne MacArthur, plus a whole host of award-winning photographers including Brent Sturton, Steve Winter, and Charlie Hamilton James. Britta won't settle for preaching to the converted, and this year she was invited to speak about her work and the wildlife trade on a huge platform in China. The talk has already had millions of views, and subsequently a Chinese edition of the Photographers Against Wildlife Crime book has been given the go-ahead. Britta has won numerous international awards and is the only photographer to win the coveted European Wildlife Photographer of the Year twice. Her list of other awards is so long, it's best you just check out her website. She has a fascinating story to tell, and I could go on about her work, awards, and achievements, but Britta kindly gave us 2 hours of her time, so much better to hear it all from her. Enjoy the show. We are here in deepest South London. Always make jokes, the North Londoner coming south, but also particularly in these times of coronavirus. But I got the train here. It was totally fine. I think we're at a safe distance away. But Britta, thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to talk to us, about your work and what you've been up to. Has been a particularly exciting year for you, but you've been doing this a long time, so it feels like you're getting some reward for your hard work, of course. But in kind of knowing you for a number of years now and the conversations that we have, one thing that really stuck with me from the beginning was your work is so geared towards protecting animals, giving animals a voice, and I wondered where this came from. Where did the love of animals come from, before you became a wildlife photojournalist?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me to give this talk, and that you came all the way south of the river. It's very brave of you. I used to be really frightened to go south of the river as well. I remember it. I was like horrified when somebody said I had to go south of the river. But then I actually really fell in love with South London, Southeast London in particular. So I'm super happy here. New Crossgate.
That's great. And we're in it's very exciting. We're in your brand new, and it is literally brand new house, apartment with this amazing view. We've got a full panoramic from east to west of the river. We see all the buildings.
Yeah, we should take a photo of it.
Yeah, we will. We'll put that up in the notes for sure.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So where did my love start? It started at home because both of my parents were sort of animal protectors and carers, whenever there was, not professionally, but whenever there was like, a homeless bird, something flown out of the nest, or if there was, whatever my dad would find, like a hedgehog being too close to the road, we would sort of go and, rescue animals basically, and then look after them if they were injured as well. So this is really where it started. It was really about empathy, I think. My family very much raised me with look around you and see what's there, and maybe you can help not only with animals, also with people. Like I pretty much always had strangers joining us for Christmas. It's like Dad, who's that guy? It's like, oh, I met him. His wife just died or whatever. So we just always basically had a family where we just constantly would help people and looking after. So I think my parents really taught me empathy.
Great. And then did that just kind of continue throughout your adolescence? And, when did photography become a part of your love of animals and your love of wildlife?
I think I was always quite good in storytelling from very early age. I had to sort of a really good imagination and a way of telling stories to people to engage them. And then I found a talent in photography, but just simply because to be honest, I really wanted to become an artist, like a painter, and I have zero talent for it. I tried it.
And what age are we talking about this time?
I mean, teenager. As a teenager, I already sort of knew that I wanted to do something creative, and I was interested in storytelling, but I wasn't sure how I was going to tell stories, basically. And then, it just sort of happened that during my A-levels, I did a photography course, and I just really fell in love with photography, basically, and then did an apprenticeship as a photographer in a very commercial studio in Germany, and which was good because I really learned the skills and the craft of photography. But I got bored because it was very commercial and I didn't really have any interest. So I thought, how can I apply this skill and this knowledge now to something more meaningful? So that's how I came to England, because I found basically, at the time it was called the Bournemouth Art College, which is now, I think, Academy or something. And this is really how it all started. And I arrived in England literally with one suitcase exactly 30 years ago.
Wow.
And never went back. I mean, of course, I go back to see my family in Germany, but I really decided to sort of make England my home. And then Brexit came, but we're not going to talk about that. But so with regards to photography, really what I found was that I had a way to take photos that got attention for certain issues and subjects.
And were you doing animals right from the beginning?
Not right from the beginning, but pretty much. I mean, I had to do projects in college. This was a BA, and I had to do it. For the first year we did projects, but even that, it all revolved around empathy and compassion. Basically that's just something I'm interested in. And then it started in the zoo in London, really, because I visited the Regent's Park, and I literally just went for a walk and I could smell animals. I had no idea there was a zoo there. And what I could smell were wolves. And I walked up and I looked at the wolves through the fence. And I mean, of course, instinctively, it was like, God, that's so wrong. What are these wolves doing in this zoo, But I was intrigued. So I took my camera into the zoo and then came back with some pictures, processed them next day in college. And sort of felt that the photos were almost telling something about myself, like how much I hated enclosures and confinement, and how people feel entitled to do that to wildlife. Also, at that time, interestingly, I sort of developed claustrophobia, actually, and I think it kind of was connected somehow. So I kept going back to the zoo, and then at the end of the year, there were external examiners coming to the college, and there was a guy from a publishing house who saw the pictures I took in the zoo, and I mean, pretty much immediately gave me a contract. So before I left college, I already had this contract with Phaidon Press to do this book, which was called Zoo.
There will be lots of photographers who are studying now, are listening to this, that just won't believe that. Of course, the content, and I'm sure your work was really good, but most people don't leave university with a book contract immediately. But I guess these were also different times.
Yeah, it was different times, but also I wasn't 19. I was already 20. I think I was 23 when I came or something. I've just given away my age. So, I mean, I had already gone through education in photography, so to speak, in Germany. And I think if you were 19 and you go to university or college, very different, because you only start exploring of what you actually want to do. But I already knew what I wanted to do, and I already had the skill photography. I just wanted to expand on it. And I think this is, why the work was already quite mature, let's put it like that.
Yes.
And then, of course, the people I really adored at the time were Magnum photographers.
Like who, for example?
Oh my God, at the time I really have to kind of think, no, you've put me on the spot.
That's okay.
Let's mention that later, shall we?
Yeah.
But, there were quite a lot of people. In fact, I had the pleasure of meeting Peter Marlowe. I don't know if you remember him.
No, I don't. You put me on the spot now.
Yeah, put you on the spot. He passed away, unfortunately, I think about a couple of years ago. But there were a lot of influences, black and white, old school black and white photography, not only Magnum, beyond that as well. Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, for example, is one of the guys. André Kertész, they are sort of my heroes. Eastern European photographers I had a great interest in because I liked the way they looked at subjects in a very abstract way. And I think you can still see that in my photos now, actually,
yes.
Sort of with light, working with light and shadows. I like very much. But, and then, basically sort of from then, it sort of almost all happened by itself because, I left college and I just started working as a photographer. I thought I was going to go back to Germany. I thought I'd stay in London, another couple of years to just explore what's going on. But then, of course, I became really busy as a photographer. Yeah. And I was also working for an agency. Suddenly...
So just going back, what was the book commission that you were offered?
It wasn't a commission. It was basically publishing my work.
Okay.
And that's Zoo.
Right.
And that book, I have to say, it took me forever to move away from because people always associated with me with it.
Yes.
I mean, I did so many other projects and still people now sometimes, I go somewhere and they go, oh my God, you're not the Britta Jaschinski, like the Zoo Britta Jaschinski. It's like, argh.
Yeah.
So, almost like I had to do photographers against wildlife crime to get away from Zoo, I think,
That's so funny. And, I mentioned Sandra Bartocha last week, and she said, just moving away from taking pretty pictures of plants, like, oh my God, you just became, you do this and you have great success, but then it becomes this Achilles heel as well, and a bit of a problem.
Well, when you in the jury of international competitions, which I am, we used to really call these pictures Bartocha style.
Yes.
Because they were everywhere suddenly. I mean, she really inspired, people to take these photos. I mean, they're really stunning pictures, but I think there's nobody who did it better than her, to be honest, So, of course, there's loads of excellent plant photography out there, but I almost wish she could have discontinued doing this because there was so much soul and heart and love, in these shots. But this is what happens, of course. I think people like to label you,
Yeah.
Maybe it even happens more with women. I'm not sure. But, for me, it took a long time to kind of stop people talking about Zoo when they talk about me.
Yeah.
But, even with magazines, let's say up until a few years ago, people would always start talking about it. It's like, do you know what, guys? Can we just talk about what I'm doing right now? Because right now I'm also producing a great body of work, which also equally gets attention and is winning awards. So why do you still want to talk about this? But I think it's because it was an inspiration for a lot of people. The Zoo project was an inspiration for a lot of people. I mean, there's X amount of mates who would sort of ring me up when I was working on this saying like, oh, somebody's copying your work. And I would always say, great. Yeah. Isn't it great? The more people working on this. So I've never been protective over this. And, I always loved talking to students, inspire students. And I, for the longest time, felt, I want to reply to every request any student has. And I want to always be open for interviews. Of course, I can't do that anymore now because I'm too busy. But for the longest time, I really tried to do it. And I gave a lot of talks across the UK and also actually internationally at universities and colleges because I love the idea when people feel inspired and I feel honored. If people say, wow, your book really inspired me to take the same photos or similar photos, I'm thinking, great, go and do it.
That's brilliant. And I think, there are many ways of getting our work out there in the form of prints and books and online. But I feel personally, there's no better way than watching someone present their work, on a beautiful screen, talking about their passion, talking about their experiences. And that is how you inspire people.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened. I was very lucky being at Bournemouth College. There was a budget for guest speakers. We had a lot of people. I mean, like Martin Parr. I mean, we had to, honestly, name a famous photographer, especially from Britain. They were there, they came.
That's great.
And that was, so inspiring.
That's amazing. And so after Zoo, it became this, problem for you for many years of just being associated with being the Zoo photographer. But did you, I mean, obviously you got a taste for, working with a really good publisher like Phaidon, and was book something that you knew that you always wanted to work on in the future, and long-term projects?
No, to be honest, not at all. I mean, for me, it always happened through coincidence, like always because somebody came to me, to be honest. I did a book with Thames and Hudson called Wild Things. And that happened because there was a German publisher coming to me, asking me to do a book. And that was almost like a sort of retrospective of Britta Jaschinski, all the work I had done from very early to 2000. My problem was a little bit, I had to make a living, and I'm very lucky in that way that I've always made a living with photography, but it was not always the photography I wanted to do. So I did a lot of travel photography, which I enjoyed. But I really pretty much traveled for 7 years, lived out of a suitcase, lived in hotels, never saw my friends and family. After 7 years, I had to pack that up because I was actually sick and tired of that life. But it made me a really good living. And then that allowed me to put my time into the work I really wanted to do. So almost like, I sort of did a bit on and off time. And I had a few years where I just completely only worked commercially. I wanted to save money to buy a property, which I thought then would allow me to spend more time with photography I really wanted to do. So I always had to juggle, my passion for photography and what I really wanted to say, which was, looking at the wildlife trade, environmental issues. I had to kind of find the balance with making my living through travel photography. I did public relations photography, mostly related around travel and all interesting stuff, because to be honest, every photo shoot I do, I always enjoy the creative process. So I never roll my eye, even have helped people where it's not my kind of photography at all, like somebody wanted me to do an album cover for their performance. And I was like, it's really not me. And I kind of said, I can really recommend some excellent photographers for that, but they wanted me to do it. And so I did it, and I really actually love doing it. So there's always the creative process, which I really enjoy, whatever subject, it is.
And I think, it made me think of when I interviewed Joanne, and she talked about, shooting 600 weddings. And
oh my God.
Yeah, I know, unbelievable.
I have to say that's one thing I could not do.
But of course, I know there's a question for you.
I've done it once for a friend.
Yeah.
No, twice actually. Never again. Gave me so many sleepless nights.
It's the most stressful.
It's the most stressful job, because
and I think
the responsibility of that one-off event. If you do it for yourself, like if you're on a photo shoot undercover, you also only get that one chance. But if you screw it up, you screw it up for yourself. Yeah. But to screw someone else's up,
I know the pressure. Obviously, it's it can be hugely lucrative, and maybe there's a stigma around wedding photography amongst serious photographers. But if you need to make a living, like you say, you're doing commercial work, travel work. I wonder, like, who are the photographers out there that are doing pure photography, everything from the heart, everything that they want? They don't have to compromise. They don't have to do anything. Do they exist, these photographers?
It's a really good question. I'm not sure. I think the happiest, if you talk about wildlife and nature photography, I think the happiest probably in the past would be National Geographic photographers, I would say, just because, I don't know what it's like now, but of course, I think they used to pay, a good fee people could survive on, basically. And then, of course, you are out, doing what you want to do. Not all year round, but you don't have to, because I think you go off on a shoot for like 1 month, 2 months, and then you come back and you edit, and and you get paid for it. So I think that's really it's a good situation. But for me, I have to say it's also sort of happened that I kept this balance for a long time, and then I realized slowly but surely that the work I really wanted to do took over financially, my commercial work. So I then stopped doing more and more commercial.
So it happened organically? It
happened organically, where I suddenly, I was in the position, and that probably happened about 10 years ago, that I could actually make a living with photography I really wanted to do. So I was one of the people who was very lucky and privileged to really get on assignments and to do jobs where I thought, wow, I can't believe this is happening to me. This is like my dream job, and I even get paid for it.
Yeah, that's great. And is the income spread, through speaking events, through published work, through agency work?
Yeah, that was almost then in addition, because I started to do this work and I could make a living with that work. And then on top of it, I was invited to do speaker events. But to be honest, at the beginning, I didn't charge for it, because I kind of was just thrilled to be invited.
Sure.
and thrilled to kind of share my knowledge. And then, of course, I realized it was kind of getting more and more. And then, of course, at some point I had to put my foot down and say, listen, yeah, I would love to come, but you have to pay me. And people do. I mean, it depends on what events there are, but there should be a budget. And I think if it's an event where really nobody gets paid, then okay, I also could come if you cover my expenses. But there are events where the people do get paid. I mean, the organizers get paid, the editors get paid.
The caterers get paid.
The caterers get paid. The people who clean the place get paid, and so the photographers, speakers should get paid, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with you. And we had the conversation earlier about this, and maybe it's a good time to open up a little bit on this. We'll obviously come back, but it seems to be, I know obviously COVID's hit a lot of people pretty hard, but I've certainly experienced it a lot in the last year, that the budgets are dwindling. People are going back to the old ways of, oh, it's good exposure or you'll get a credit. And I mean, you talk to even getting requests yourself like this, what can we have your work for free? And I've actually written an unpublished article about this, and it's entitled "Don't Work for Free," and it's a hard one because particularly for young photographers that do want exposure and do want to get their name out and get recognition. It's walking that balance. But if we don't do it collectively, the budgets will never go up. They will, people will just always assume that it's photography. And also because of the nature of photography, nowadays everyone's a photographer. It's it's brought the value of it down a little bit. That trying to get properly rewarded for your craft, which you put so many years into, is getting more challenging.
I mean, it's almost like photography got devalued. And I think it's partly when analog vanished.
Yeah.
Digital photography came in. I mean, I had assignments from so many editors who adored my photography, and suddenly they said, oh, no, we're taking the photos ourselves. And then, of course, he saw the result, and they saw the result themselves, and then they went straight back onto me, going like, actually, no, maybe you are taking the photos of us. So I think it backfired a little bit. I think the money saving on photography has backfired on magazines and whatever. But of course, if photographers do give their work for free, then of course, what do we then expect? We all need to stick together. Photography has to have a price tag, and only you as a photographer can put that tag onto your photography, whatever you think it's worth it. And I tell people this all the time. And, people who sometimes come and want to work with me or whatever always say like, well, let me ask you, do you sell your pictures or you give them away for free? Because if you give them away for free, there's no chance in hell we can work together. Yeah. You have to sell your photography. Or, of course, there's a lot of young photographers now who say like, yeah, I'm making a living with my photography. And so I go, where do you live? Oh, I live with my parents. Right. Okay. Actually, you don't make a living with your photography then, do you? So, I mean, this is a really touchy subject because, I get really annoyed about it. And I don't give any photos away for free. Especially not to magazines. So, if there is a group effort, I have donated my pictures to books for a good effort to raise money. I have also, of course, given some photos away for charity, but also charities have to pay me, So,
and also because they have budgets.
Exactly. Yeah. And the people who work in charities also get paid, they're not working there for free, are they? So, for me, it's like I look very carefully at who's approaching me. But if it's a commercial, a magazine where an editor gets paid, or, an online platform where an editor gets paid or whatever, whoever gets paid must not come to me and ask me to work for free. It's as simple as that. If somebody comes and says, I've got this idea for a fundraising, I'm not taking any money from it. It's just I'm raising money for this. I absolutely, totally donate my pictures, and I always have done. I always will. But people who actually get paid must not come and ask me. I get very annoyed about it. And, I always say, like, let me ask you this. I mean, do you work for free, or why are you asking me to work for free? Oh, yeah, but we credit you and the picture already exists, doesn't it? And it's like, yeah, but how do I feed myself and continue this work? Because people always come and say, Britta, your work is amazing. It's so brave what you do. But yes, you need to pay me so I can do this work, because I don't have any other form of income. I make a living with photography and with selling pictures. And, sometimes when I do really well with a shoot, so I do something off my own back, I pay for it myself, or I find somebody who wants to pay for it or sponsors me for it, then I can sell the pictures. And through the sales of these pictures, that time then allows me, I can spend on something else, like, which is more, like working for a charity, or, like working on these books, for example. The reason why I could spend time on editing a book, I mean, we talk about these books later, is because I did really well on some sales of a project I did the year before, which actually was sponsored by private sponsors, So it worked out really fine. But in general, we photographers need to get paid for our pictures. Otherwise, we can't survive. And then if we can't survive, we can't feed ourselves, we can't take these photos. It's very simple.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think
I always say, when people come to me, but we have no budget. So this is the line I really love. Hi, we thought we'd give you really good credit and it'd be really good for you to be associated with our press. Yes. Yeah, right. Fuck off. Sorry, but no. And then of course, I'd always say, like, listen, if there is no budget, that's because you or somebody in your organization has decided that there is no budget for photography. There is no God out there or a greater force that says there is no budget for photography. You decided that.
Yeah, because all of these organizations have budget meetings,
And every magazine, so if you don't have a budget, and I always say that if you don't have a budget, then you don't have photos. It's very simple. Then you have an empty magazine. And then the best thing is, of course, when people come also, this is another thing I have to tell you, is when people kind of say, oh, we want to give you publicity. So we thought we'd give you like a whole double-page spread or like 6 double-page spreads so that you can publicize your book or your work. And it's like, no, hold on. Let me rephrase that for you. You want to decorate your magazine with my pictures, and you want to do that for free so that you can pay yourself more money, right?
Yeah, and publicity doesn't buy you food or pay your mortgage, does it?
Yeah. Does it feed your children? No, it doesn't. It's really, it's honestly, it's got to stop. It's got to stop. People have to shape up and stop it. It's highly insulting, and we're all sick and tired of it.
Yeah, and I think, I think with how connected we all are as well through social media. And in fact, I did see a really good post the other day on Facebook where someone had published the rates for specific magazines, whether it was like Vanity Fair, Esquire, some nature magazines, and they published all the rates that photographers should be getting paid, and these are the going rates and they're fair. And the person who was receiving this, because they'd put something out there saying, oh, I've been asked to write this and submit 5 or 6 photos, and they've offered to pay me whatever it was, £100. Does this sound right? And this person was like, no, absolutely not. This is what you get paid for quarter page, double page. And so we have the opportunity, as we're also well connected, to share this information, and hopefully a number of people will listen to this podcast and hear how strongly and quite rightly you feel about it. Don't give your work away for free. I think you've already said it, but just to reiterate, if it's there is a case, I think, for really, really good publicity, but it has to be really, really good. It has to be really, really authentic, but those are few and far between anyway, so just get paid.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go back to books, because you
because we hate them so much.
Yeah, well, it just sounds really nice that the way your work sort of organically moved into, and I suppose organically, but you're working hard all the time on the photography that you're really passionate about, which is photographing animals in very difficult situations and giving them a voice and doing that. How can you do more of this, and to be able to get to a stage where you're being rewarded financially for it is great. So then
if you want to be financially rewarded, don't do a book.
Yeah, exactly. But also, I mean, what's great, I mean, I've known you for a number of years, and I know that you've won some awards. And when I was look on your website over the last few days, I was actually shocked. I was like, oh my goodness, you really have, and this is another side of your photography, and for all photographers is getting success in prestigious awards is a good way, of course, of getting recognition, and then you're invited to speak. But I mean, you really have gone to town. 2 times winner of the European Nature Photographer of the Year, numerous Wildlife Photographer of the Year, World Press. We'll put a long list in the show notes on your page on the podcast section. But was this something that when you were shooting, you started early on, was just, okay, I want to get recognition, I need to get this work out there and seen to a bigger audience? Were you entering, for example, when you were doing Zoo and in your earlier days, and just continue to do so?
I mean, I think in the early days, I submitted photos for competitions because it was just the thing people would do in colleges.
Mm-hmm.
So it survived a little bit last year in college, we sort of almost had to do it as part of the course, because I think the tutors realized that it's a really good way to kind of get, sort of known. And so I kind of was almost naturally doing it.
Yeah.
And then, I was just lucky enough to scoop up some awards, I suppose. And I was like, actually, do you know what? It's quite easy. It's not so hard. But then, of course, you also enter, and then, it can happen as well. You get a bit spoiled.
Sure.
And you think like, yeah, I'm just going to enter this. And then, of course, you don't win anything. You go, hold on, but this picture is really good. Right?
Then your ego is bruised.
Yeah, it's quite funny. No, I mean, I think as a photographer, you really learn to get rejected. I think there's a lot of rejection out there. And I think it's quite hard. And I think a lot of people actually don't survive that rejection. You need to be quite confident to survive all that. It's a fierce battle. It's very competitive, and it's very hard to kind of reach a point where you really are established and your pictures are seen and acknowledged, and you have the feeling that they're really doing something. And of course, you get paid for it. It's difficult to achieve. It's totally possible, but you have to work incredibly hard. I mean, sometimes people say like, "Oh my God, you've all these awards and your pictures everywhere," and like, how do you do it? And it's like, well, I work bloody hard for it, Like I work night and day, literally. Like when people come, I had some assistants, and there's this sort of thing of like, oh yeah, sorry, I need to leave now. I'm meeting my boyfriend. Sorry, mate, there is no boyfriend. It doesn't exist. Right now, you are working with me, and when you work with me, there is no boyfriend waiting for you. And if there is, don't come back tomorrow. I'm hardcore with it. It's like either you work and then you focus on that. We all have our private lives, and, so do I. But keep that separate. If you want to achieve something, you need to be focused. I've stopped working with, sort of students and stuff because it's not helpful, actually, because, there's always the looking at the time. There's always something else. And they want the experience, they want to put it in their CV, but how helpful is it for anyone involved? Sorry, no, I have not had a great experience with that.
Yeah.
So I work them on mostly. I mean, I have hired people, specific people, like if I need somebody on board for something, I really find them because, I do a lot of research on who could be the right person for it. And then I just approach them directly and say, look, I want you to come with me. Would you do that? Whatever, because also a lot of stuff I've been doing is delicate situations and it's undercover and whatever. You can't just take a random kind of assistant or students
of course
to these places.
And when it comes to making books,
exactly,
you need to work with good editors, like you have for a long time worked with Keith and designers and production houses.
I've been very lucky as well.
A real team
just
effort.
Met some great people, actually. I mean, it's almost like your life comes together like a puzzle, which is a wonderful thing. But you have to work very hard to make this happen. But I just want to come back to one really interesting thing about awards, because I think obviously the biggest award, or the first biggest award I won, was the European Wildlife Photographer of the Year in 2011, and that was in Germany. I couldn't go to the awards ceremony, sadly. I couldn't be there. I was very gutted, but I just couldn't make it, basically. And the press came up with some really interesting lines.
Mm-hmm.
So this was the cheetah photo, which has become quite famous, actually. And it's now in history of wildlife photography, whatever. But at the time, people were going like, what is this? This is like a blurry photo. There was like somebody would sort of write, it's like taking like a police camera, like a speeding camera,
so just
photo.
insulting it, basically.
Yeah, really insulting. Oh no, I mean that photo was ripped apart, and there was one press who said like, "Woman scooped up nature award."
Wow.
I was like shocked. I mean, it's like an article from the 60s.
Yeah.
So I was the first woman to get this award, and people just couldn't do it. It was like, I mean, it literally was like, oh my God, it's a blurry photo. It's black and white.
She can't even focus a camera.
I know. And it's taken by a woman. Oh my God, like alarm bells were ringing. And I think, the GDT, they had quite a lot of abuse, shouted at them for giving this photo an award,
Wow.
And then, 2 years later, 2013, I won another award there. And sort of category winner, but I gave a talk, and this is the first time when I was actually there, where people could meet me. And I remember, so then I had a standing ovation after my talk. And I remember that Sandra Batocha literally said, thank God, jetzt haben wir eine reine Weste, which basically means like, we cleaned our, our vest, basically. What do you say? There must be a similar expression to this. It's basically they kind of forever felt that it sort of burnt them, that they gave that award to this picture.
I see.
And because then the audience went, oh my God, she is actually amazing. And she really did deserve that award. I think that everybody felt like, okay, no, people understood. And what they had done as well was that they blew up the picture from the award in 2011. They actually made that because they knew I was coming as a speaker, and they put a massive, huge picture outside.
Wonderful.
The exhibition space, huge outside, so everybody could see this photo.
Amazing.
So that was quite funny. But then, of course, so last year, 2017, interesting is that, so I gave an interview. I won this award again. And I went on stage, and Florian Müller, rightly so, and I really didn't think about it. He then said, so Britta Jaschinski was the first woman to win this award in 2011, and we had a tough time over it. Afterwards, I think people realized that she absolutely, totally deserved this award. Yeah. And now she's again here winning this again. And now she's actually the first person to ever have won this award twice. And he said, sorry, I just thought I need to make that point.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I never even thought about this. And I think it's really interesting that, as a woman, it is quite hard.
Yeah, and that's what I was
don't
going to
want
ask
to whine
you
about it, but it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, and from that, you win this great award, it should be celebrated. But and I think this was in 2011, like you say, not the 1960s. And I sort of feel like, well, actually, since from 2011 till now, it's got even worse. The Me Too movement, but I mean, it certainly hasn't stopped you. But do you feel like you've had to work twice as hard?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think also with regards to the acceptance. So I think it's almost like it's presumed that women don't need to make a living with photography or something. It's like almost like, we all have really rich husbands who pay for our hobbies or something.
Yeah.
It's quite hard to kind of get acknowledged as a professional in this industry. Because it's just presumed that I'm probably married to some guy who's got money, and that's why I can afford doing all these trips to China and Africa, whatever. I mean, it's all self-earned money, of course. But so I think I often get approached in a different way than I think a man would get approached. Mm-hmm. I really think so. Because, I think people go and say, of course he needs to make a living. He's got a family. So we need to offer him a budget.
His poor wife and children.
Yeah, but Britta might be able to do it for free or something.
Yeah.
But I think that has stopped now because I think I bite back quite hard, as you can imagine.
But it's taken till the age of, we won't say your age, but I mean.
But I think people know go like what we do know is that Britta Jaschinski needs to get paid, so let's not call her if we don't have a budget.
Definitely.
But listen, I don't want to kind of talk too much about this of getting paid, but I think overall it's quite hard in nature photography. Of course, people always talk about this. So why are there more men than women? To be really honest, I think it's because if you work in nature, it's quite rough. You have to rough it. I remember at Wild Photos, a talk by Vincent Monnier, where he said he slept in this tent in the Arctic all by himself for 4 months. And there were all kinds of problems with wildlife and whatever. And it was a whole talk. It was an absolute wonderful talk. And I thought, I would never, ever want to do that, Of course, people come to me and say, like, how can you go undercover in China? Mm-hmm, That's just insane. I find that easier than being on my own in the wilderness for 4 months in a tent.
And maybe the narrative is there's something really manly about that, man versus bear, man in freezing temperatures.
I wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women don't want to do that. It's just not, I think, we like our bathrooms.
Hey, you're perpetuating the stereotype here, Britta. Come on.
I know. Maybe I'm really sexist now. But I don't know. I think nature photography is maybe something, if you really want to rough it, I think that's probably something, men can do better. I really think so. I mean, I have, spoken to some of these people who really go into the wilderness all by themselves for months without any contact, to anyone. And I'm not sure if there's so many women out there who want to do that. There are some. I mean,
Yeah.
I can mention one here, or she.
Do you think? Yeah, exactly. And Sandra Bartoka, she's spent many years in cold situations in -40.
But on her own in a tent for 4 months, not sure, Sandra. But the thing is, the question is, of course, like, so why do we think that women have to do this? He said, this is what I was actually aiming for, because people always say, like, we want to get more women into these competitions, taking these photos, of the Arctic, of the rainforest, whatever. And I'm thinking, like, why? Yeah. Why do we have to criticize that women don't do it? Can't we just see what amazing things women do? Like, for example, most people I work with are writers, female writers. Most journalists I work with are female. So like, can we focus on that and say, isn't that amazing that there's so many incredibly talented female writers out there? Mm-hmm. So why do we have to kind of point out what women don't do? Why can't we celebrate what they do and what they like doing?
Yeah, but I suppose we also don't want women to be held back in the field of nature photography because it is so dominated by men. We do want want it to be more equal, of course. And I was also wondering about because your style is very unique. I think it is instantly recognizable, personally. And you're also not, a pure wildlife photographer with, beautiful technical landscapes and animal behavior. It's much, for me, it's more edgy, it's darker, it's richer, and it's very different. And so, was this a conscious decision? Was this, the way you moved into this style? Was this something that also came organically? Because it's like a musician with a great sound. It's like instantly recognizable, and that's a hard thing to achieve visually.
Jimi Hendrix. Oh my God. It's a really good question. I have early influences, I mentioned earlier, mostly abstract. So I wasn't really interested in sort of decorative color photography. I really appreciate it and I respect it. And, there's some excellent photographers out there who do it. But I was always looking for a minimalistic approach in my pictures. I mean, my whole life is very minimalistic. I mean, if you look at my studio where we're sitting right now.
We're in a white box now.
You know that I like only having the essential things in my life. And I think in pictures, I work the same way. It's like, what's essential? What am I trying to say here? So I like to strip information of images even before I take the photo, basically.
And of course, black and white lends itself so well to
this. Although, do you know what? I mean, the Confiscated series I did is actually in color, but people still call it black and white, which is, it's really strange. It's like, it sort of plays a trick on people's minds because I'm known for black and white photography, so therefore people presume. And what I did do is I drained the color out a bit, but I left some color in to actually keep it as a color picture because I really wanted to do that deliberately. But it was like, draining out the color to probably give a certain sense of devastation or something. Apocalyptic, is probably a better word for it. But I mean, I definitely made a conscious decision and that way at some point, not so much about my style, that came sort of organically and naturally. I know sort of what I like, but I try not to take photos I've seen before. If I know a photographer is really good in something and I happen to go into the same area of whatever I want to say, I try to stay well clear of doing something somebody else has already done. What's the point? So it's almost like I look through my viewfinder and when I see something I've seen before, I don't actually press the shutter, even if it's a good photo. So it was really hard for me. For example, in 2017, I went for the first time, for the longest time, back to Africa to just literally take some safari photos. And there were some people there who took, excellent photography, excellent, absolutely beautiful. I love looking at these pictures, but I couldn't get myself to take these photos. I just couldn't get myself to do it. So I came back with very little, to be honest. But that was also fine with me because I actually just loved, watching the wildlife and helping other people, inspiring them and talking to them about photography. But I myself kind of felt, I saw what other people did and I looked at this and I thought, beautiful photo. But what is the point of me taking the same photo?
Sure.
I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so this is something I'm trying to do. I'm not saying I'm succeeding in it, because I'm sure that there are other people might say, well, actually, but she's taken that photo and I've seen that before and whatever, I'm not making a big thing.
Yes.
It's just for myself, for my own heart.
Yeah.
I'm sort of trying to stay clear of that. Also, not really because I want to make myself different. It's more like it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah. And you're right. I think that's such a good, for people listening anyway, to hear this in terms of advice, is it really is shooting from the heart is going to give you the best results than trying to be like someone or trying. I think emulation is good. Certainly when you're starting out, it's looking at other photographers and getting a feel for the style. Yeah. But you get the feeling, don't you, in the pit of your stomach when something, connects with, and that could be anything. It could be a line in the Masai Mara, or it could be, we'll come on to talk about this shortly, your confiscated series of elephant hooves in shopping trolleys. It's a dramatic subject and quite different, but you have that feeling. We should move on because there's so much more I want to talk about. And first of all, China, was obviously, we're in this very exciting period for you right now in China. But I wanted to go back and hear about your first trip, what motivated you to go there, what you were anticipating, and a little bit of the results of those early stages.
I mean, I went the first time in 2012, and the reason why I went to China was simply because I was for already 20 years before really working on, documenting illegal wildlife trade or the legal wildlife trade. I mean, zoo was very much like part of this work, on legal wildlife trade. Yeah. It's still legal now. I mean, you can still, capture an animal and take it in a zoo. These days, even more so. But zoo is another story we might want to talk about at some point later if we have time. But I felt, okay, look, I could do all this work in Europe and in the US, but if I don't do anything in China, what is the point? Mm-hmm. The biggest powers in the world are the places we need to focus on and changing something. Because, what happens here right now is that there's in the UK, animals have rights, yeah? But with more and more rights coming, and we can say, isn't that great that the UK no longer allows fur farming? But does that mean that there's no more demand for it? No, it doesn't. It means that companies, like pharmaceutical companies in terms of animal testing, fur farms, is being taken over to other countries where there is no rights, no regulation. So I thought, well, I need to go to China then, don't I? This is where I need to start. It's almost like you need to start where it's the worst.
Yeah.
And then go, work your way down, basically.
And how do you start there? Did you have contacts? Because it's so important to have fixers and people that can organize things for you on the ground, especially if you're doing undercover work.
Yeah.
How did it begin?
It was really hard. But I saw a documentary, very, very inspiring documentary about Jill Robinson, the founder and CEO of Animals Asia. Yes. And that blew me away. It's an hour documentary. I mean, I can only highly recommend for people to watch it. It completely blew me away because basically her journey was like, she's from the UK and she worked with a charity in China, and she came across by almost pure chance in a basement, a bear that was used to extract bile for traditional Chinese medicine. And that was in the 90s. And she promised herself that she's going to take action against that because it's the cruelest thing on earth, basically. I watched this documentary and I was like, right, that's it. I'm going to China. And I just sent her an email and I said, this is my website. And I was wondering, could we meet up? And had a pretty much instant reply saying, wow, I'm blown away by your photography. Yes, please come. And you can stay with me for 3 days and I'll show you around. And so that was my contact. And then, of course, through that, she also helped me with bits and pieces. But it was very difficult because she also cannot be associated with, various things. So we never really made a big thing out of it. But, in terms of the performances, I mean, they gave me some hints, of where to go. But I also very much freestyled on this trip. I just searched for things, basically. And then also partly on this trip, I met with a friend from Hong Kong. And because I was then with her, it was easier to actually get away with stuff because we were two women. And we would just literally pretend to be tourists. Because if you walk around in China, people get quite suspicious of you, like, why are you there? So it's two reasons. Either you are there because you work there yourself. You are sort of there for business.
Yeah, you're an expat, yeah.
Or you're a journalist. And if you're a journalist, people don't want to have anything to do with you, basically. So it was hard. I mean, the first time, it was hard. But I was there, I think, in total for 3 or 4 weeks, and I came back. I had no idea what I was coming back with, really, because I shot everything on film.
Yeah, and this is a lovely part of the story.
I couldn't actually see anything I was doing.
And I think when I first met you, I was like, of course, this is so obvious. You know, one of the things when everybody's switched to digital, you have this, in a way, this very clever kind of by default rather than design process of still shooting film. So, and it doesn't, obviously, I know you have issues at borders with crossing borders with film, etc. But nobody can see the pictures that you're taking at that time.
Exactly. So I kind of thought, if anyone comes into my hotel, because it's very, I don't know what it's like now, but in 2012 I had to give an itinerary. I had to kind of list down exactly where I was, and authorities said that they could potentially check on me, and all these sort of threats. And so I kind of thought, well, if somebody comes into my hotel room and finds the films, what they're going to do, they're not going to see anything so quickly. If you have a digital camera, they can absolutely. And also, I didn't want to bring a computer. So anyway, I kind of felt like that will work for me. But of course, I was shooting all this stuff, and I had no idea what I was shooting.
How many rolls of film did you take?
I think it was like over 100.
Yeah.
But so I came back and I had them all processed, and that was really like, Christmas, birthday, at the same time. It was like opening presents.
Amazing. And did you have any issues like putting that stuff through customs and any hairy moments?
I did, but it was very lucky at the end, actually.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into it too. But, I had anyway, it was fine, but my heart was in my mouth.
Yeah.
I was never so nervous in my life going through customs with these 100 films.
Wow.
It was literally, have you ever had this feeling of like your heart, you can feel it in your mouth,
trying not to look suspicious, but beads of sweat pouring down your cheeks.
It was a bit like that, actually. But anyway, I was on the plane. I was like, yes, But anyway, and then, I was quite surprised, what I ended up with. But then I sort of had forgotten that, scanning negatives, drum scans, for 100 rolls of film was actually going to bankrupt me. And it's
so expensive.
I think I spent like £5,000 on scans or something. And I mean, it was insane. But, the success story, of course, goes that, they really got into the press, and, they won quite a lot of awards, those pictures in consecutive years in international competitions. And that's, was like the reward. Not that made me rich, but
no.
I felt, it was worth it. It was worth going through all of this, So, and then, of course, I did kind of bits and pieces of other projects and assignments. I did quite a few assignments for charities, after that, also on the back of that, because people obviously thought like, wow, this is what we can do, kind of thing. So that was, like quite successful, really. But then I did switch to digital, because to be honest, it was torturous in the end.
Sure.
I mean, like plowing through all these, the process, the contact sheets.
Of course.
I just kind of thought on the next shoot, I thought, I can't face it. I have to get digital. And so I did.
And did you go back? How many times did you go back?
To China in total 4 times.
Right. Yes.
But for different reasons. And sometimes I only did like one thing, for example, and then just got really quickly back out of the country.
Yeah.
I did some filming where I didn't take any photos at all. In hindsight, I really regret that, because it was a great opportunity. But to be honest, I was too scared to take photos where I was. But I got some filming, which I secretly filmed, basically. And this is also really how Photographers Against Wildlife Crime started. I don't know if you want to kind of start talking about that.
We can certainly move
because
into that.
basically, really what happened is that when I came back after the third time or something from China, I had taken some screen grabs of the films I did. And this was some work I did undercover on a tiger farm. To be honest, I think I was insane that I did this. I wouldn't do it again. I mean, I'm not really sure what got into me to do it. But I mean, it worked and I got the stuff. But it's very hard for anyone to be brave enough to show it afterwards. Nobody wants to be associated with it because it's a private tiger farm, privately owned. The government is in support of it because it produces traditional Chinese medicine. Mm-hmm. The government makes quite a lot of money with that, So it was really difficult. And then also because I was getting involved in other stuff, I thought I better not actually mention that, because that will close down doors for doing that. Because I was beginning to get invited in China to give talks and stuff. And I was like, well, if I now start talking about that, then,
It's funny, isn't it? It's like walking that tightrope between, getting a recognition from China with your work and them buying into it, but also, exposing them, making them, not look in the best light.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I guess you're still kind of walking that tightrope now in many ways, aren't you?
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
But what happened is that I bumped into Keith Wilson. I can't remember. Hold on. Oh, yeah, I was at a gallery, actually. Oh, yeah, that was really bizarre, of course. That's a funny story. So I donated a photo for a charity, which I prefer not to mention. But it was a selling event. All our pictures were on the wall. It was like an auction, basically. And we were all standing there with champagne, and there was somebody coming along introducing himself as Keith Wilson, and he said he was an editor and he was doing a particular book at the moment, which I hadn't heard of at the time, and we started talking. And while we were talking, I was looking down and I found that we were standing on a zebra skin. And I said to him, isn't that totally weird? This is like an event to raise money for wildlife while we standing on a zebra skin. And he was like, you are right, that's so weird. So I took a photo of it. And that became actually, like we gave a couple of times in our talks together where we used that as our first photo to say, this is how we met, standing on a zebra skin, you know. And this is how we started the discussion, because we really both felt very disturbed by that. And we both felt like, God, we are a long way from really understanding what true compassion is, and a true change to this planet. And, because we work in the same sort of area, we kind of kept bumping into each other on festivals and whatever. Anyway, and then he said, listen, I want to interview you for a magazine, and sure. And then he got really interested in my work because I gave this interview. And afterwards he said, listen, I would love to actually do a book with you. And I said, thank you, but no, thank you. I have absolutely no interest in that. And he said, what? Even if I find the money? And I was like, yep, I have no interest in it because I've done a couple of books. I think every photographer probably needs to do that at some point, but I've done it. I don't need to do it again. Because I want to focus on other things. And he was very disappointed. And for about a year, he kept chasing me. And he said, but can you imagine, your work is so different. And it could be all about this sort of work. Everybody is tiptoeing, nobody wants to speak it out. But you have spoken and people have heard you. And then he said, at some point, he said, look, there is a budget here. And I want to put this into a book. So please think about it. And then I had this idea of like, why don't I do a book collaborating with other photographers? Now that I thought I have an interest in.
Yeah.
And so I said that to him. I said, hey, how about a book with other photographers? And we could call it Photographers Against Wildlife Crime. And he said, oh my God, I love that title. Whom are you thinking? And so I say, Steve Winter, Brent Sturton, Mike Nichols. And he was like, yeah, right, get out of here. And I was like, wow, hold on. Let me ask these guys. I know them. So let me ask them. And that's how it started. And I asked them. And, Charlie and James, they were all people who, at the award ceremonies, we get together and we talk about how depressed we are about the situation.
Yeah.
And how many times did we stay together afterwards at the sort of after parties or whatever, saying, what can we do? We were all scared. I think we were all really scared about where we were heading, on this planet. And so I just basically wrote an email and say, look, this is my idea. This is what I want to do. And I pretty much got a one-liner back from everybody saying, 100% count me in. Chris Packham was one of them. So anyway, by the time, of course, we had look, if you have Charlie Hamilton James, Steve Winter, Brent Sturton, Mikey Nichols, Chris Packham on board, then it's very easy to get more people if you want to, because everybody after that, beyond that, was just totally thrilled to be contacted.
That's why I waited until, to ask you to be on the podcast, because I had to get Chris Packham, I had to get Joanne MacArthur. Oh, now I can get Britta on. Yeah, no, I totally get it.
It works like that, right?
Yeah.
And I did say, let's start on the top. Let's start with my dream photographers, you know, and then we kind of, but, and then really it's all happened sort of by itself that, we wanted to raise £20,000, but Keith always said, Keith had the experience. I had no experience with Kickstarter. I was not even on social media at the time. And he said, you're idiot, shape up. You need to be on social media.
Still shooting film, no social media.
It's quite funny. So this is in 2007. I remember that I opened this account and I sent a friend's request to Neil Aldridge. And I get an email back within like a minute going, Britta, somebody just pretended to be you on Facebook because I wouldn't believe that you don't have any friends on Facebook. And I was like, mate, it is me, I'm afraid to tell you, because I only just opened the account. It was quite funny. But so, yeah, I was like, oh God, I said to Keith, can we not do this without social media? And he said, you stupid, this is not going to work. You need social media. And I said, but I like to think that we don't. It could be a challenge. And he was like, no.
Yeah. That's the beauty of collaborating.
Exactly. But anyway, so what happened is, coincidentally, and that year I was the European Wildlife Photographer of the Year again. I had won X amount of other awards as well. And that was with the Confiscated series. So all these pictures were already out there. And I knew that all the award ceremonies were lined up. All my speaker events were lined up. So I said to Keith, I've got over 60 days from September to December, all these events lined up already. So why don't I use that in promoting the Kickstarter? So we gauged the Kickstarter exactly over those 60 days.
Yeah.
And I used every event, and we just printed cards and just saying, hey, this is what we're doing. And, we just chucked them into the audience.
It's superb,
gave
isn't
a talk. And, so Keith, I would give a talk and then say, and, no, please welcome Keith Wilson. Of course, he was already known as well for all the other amazing books he's done. And so that went really well, and we raised twice as much as we thought we would. So we had the book in the bag. And that was, of course, a really nice feeling, but we still didn't know where we were going with this, really, to be honest. Because, so what I said to Keith is, I only want to do this book if we can reach China. And he said, okay, but how are we going to do that? And I said, okay, we need to make a name for us first, Photographers Against Wildlife Crime, so we become like a brand in the UK or in Europe or in the US or something. And then we're already somebody to go into China. So we do this edition. And if we raise money after the sales from that edition, we publish a new book in Chinese and English. And he's like, okay, good plan. So that's what we did. And this is really exactly what happened. This is how it worked out, basically. Yeah. And the question was all along, can a book make China look? And I have to tell you, it did.
Yeah. And that's kind of where we are at now, which is amazing that you've ended up, being invited and doing the equivalent of a TED Talk there, which has so far received how many views?
I don't know, millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
We talked about your work. We talked about the successes, the platforms that you get. And, one of the things that comes up a lot in these podcasts is the problem of preaching to the converted, and how can photography affect change? Can conservation photography work? And what are your feelings about, producing these books when everybody's on the same page? We've got to try and affect change. Do you have examples of change being affected with this work? Have you seen positive stories come from this? Have you seen policy change, these kind of things happen as a result?
Yes. I mean, I think it's a little bit too early to talk about policy changes, although we are working on something. Yeah. I mean, we are going into law with what we're doing, and we have, we've definitely collaborated with lawyers or worked with foundations that, made a deal with us to use our photography in presentations for lawyers.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, it's very difficult to kind of really say, that's happened through that, isn't it? Or this was a little bit my problem with people saying so why don't you have a charity or something? But then you would have to come up with what other charities do. It's okay, with our project, we are saving 5,000 rhinos by 2025 and stuff. And to be honest, that's just not me.
Yeah, because you're also a photographer.
And also, and even if I was more than a photographer, I just don't know. And I don't know why these people come up with these figures. Because for me, this is always a bit you can say, okay, with that money, we can build 3 miles fence or something to protect a group of rhinos. That's you can say, but you can't say with the work you do that brings that and that change. Sure. You can only say you can try to do this.
Yeah, because also you are, and the book is one part of connectivity to affect change. It's undoubtedly that photography has the power to move, inform, and inspire people. And it's not like you can just say, hey, look, we've done this beautiful book with lots of amazing and hard-hitting images. You still have to push to get it in the hands of the right people, that then this can hopefully, you're spreading out the tentacles to reach people that are in power, and the people that can give, you a platform like you have had in China, which is awesome. So it's not, I understand it's hard to quantify.
I mean, it's interesting because a lot of people say to me, like, oh, so why don't you do more exhibitions and why don't we kind of see your pictures more like there and there, whatever? It simply is because this is not what I'm focusing on. I'm actually focusing, we're doing a lot of things behind the scene. People don't know that we're doing that. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're doing in collaboration with governments, and yeah, I mean, I can't really kind of even talk too much about it because there's some stuff, some of it's sort of vaguely delicate, but, our work is really used as evidence. It's used, for a lot of bigger machines, that are working on something, basically.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And I think that's when you can say, look, it's a success. Not that you can sit back and stop. It's almost like campaigning, isn't it? You can't just sit back and go, here lawyer or here, authoritarian person in China, you can go and fix this with this beautiful book. But it's planting seeds to affect change.
And and I mean the reach we had globally has been unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, the first edition already we shipped into 50 different countries. I mean, we had addresses. I mean, like sometimes Keith and me would just crack up. It was like a little red house down the green lane, close to town, in India somewhere. Yeah, and we're like, what is this, a real address or something? Yeah. And of course, like how do these people out there living in the middle of nowhere even know about this book? And that was on the first edition. Yeah. I mean, we really are shipping into kind of the remotest. We had book orders from Gaza. It's like, what? I mean, book orders from literally all over all across the planet. And that was really great. But now, of course, our main focus is China. Yeah. And, sometimes people approach me and they say like, I would like to kind of support what you're doing. But so can you tell me like how many animals have you actually saved with that now?
Oh,
and like, so where are you putting your money? And, there's sort of, or how much money have you given to charities? Because of course there were some books, as you know, who have raised money for charity very successfully. Yes. And I'm very impressed by that. And I've got all respect for that. But we never had that concept. For us, it was always like, we want to get into China. Yes. And the way we are in China now is simply that we get press coverage about what we are doing and who we are, And China has a really strong interest right now in putting things right. As you know, they have to do it. And we are just a very good way of doing that, basically. Yes. I mean, we've become a tool for governments to talk to their own nation, literally, because we are not a charity. We're not aggressive in our approach, with our images. We're just saying how it is. Some of us risk our own lives to document this, and I think that resonates with people. People take us seriously. I mean, when I gave this talk in China recently, people said, after watching it, Britta, it was not like you were so serious. Because usually you sort of like crack a joke here and there or something. You were so serious. And I was like, listen, mate, I was either going to be put into prison, after this talk or whatever was going to happen. I didn't know what the response would be, And I said, this was a big thing for me. It's not like, going to widescreen and, talking to an audience, which I know how they work. Yeah. I know if I give a talk in Europe, I know what the response is mostly, And of course, I'm very grateful for the people that come to hear me. I think I've been very lucky in many ways. I think I've been very lucky with winning awards. I've been very lucky with getting these publications. I've been lucky with being invited to these events, and it all has sort of like now come together. And when I then can bring other people's work in there and make it a collaboration, whether it's like, other really excellent photographers I feel so thrilled with. As I said, I mean, the photographers I'm currently working with are like my heroes, Yes. I mean, some of them are people I've watched, for 10 years. And I was like, wow, first time I met them, I was like, wow. And then I could work with them. It's amazing. So,
and that's the ultimate compliment as well, isn't it? And I think also, what I'm picturing when you talk is that first trip to China with the 100 rolls of film, almost escaping, from the airport and having this relieved moment on the plane to then, 8 years later, being invited, 7 years later to be invited to speak on one of the biggest platforms. I mean, you must have just been over the moon about it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, there was a moment, so what happened is when they invited me, they asked me to arrive 2 days earlier. And I couldn't work out why that was. And I thought, why should I arrive 2 days? I'm just going to be stuck on my own in a hotel room in Guangzhou. What's the point in that? But they absolutely insisted on that. And I flew via Hong Kong, where I gave a talk at the Royal Geographic Society, which was great as well. I arrived, I was put into this hotel, and then I had like X amount of people around me constantly, and I was grilled for 2 days in a hotel room, and it was basically a process which they call what do they call it?
Interrogation.
Self-censorship.
Oh, okay.
It's a censorship, but it's like they call it self-censorship.
Right.
And I said, listen, guys, I've already self-censored this, because I know what I can say and what I can't say. No, you don't know what you can't say and what you can say. And sure enough, of course, there was a lot of things I had to change and remove, whatever. But it was an interesting process because there were a lot of things where I thought I would get away with, but I can't. And there's a lot of stuff I took out, but they knew from a previous copy they had seen, and they said, no, we want you to say that. This is a really good one to say. You need to say to people in China to stop purchasing ivory. You need to say that. It's like, okay, if you think that's a good thing to say. So,
and this is messaging from the government, which I think would surprise a lot of people.
Yeah, although the platform doesn't work with government. Right. I mean, they had to do their self, sort of censorship, basically. Right, they had to kind of like edit everything out. But, I think I explained this to you before, like it was really interesting. So a really simple example is like, let's say you have a photo of an owl, which I don't have in my presentation, but this makes it very clear because this is the example they gave to me. So you have a photo of an owl and the owl has 1 chick. That's the photo you can show. But if the owl has 3 chicks, you can't show it because it's got 3 chicks, 3 children. And this is something you can't show in China. Literally. And this is, for me, was a really big learning, fun to understand. So there's a photo I wanted to show. So it was mostly, the majority was my images, my journey as a photographer. That's why they invited me. But of course, I needed to get this book in there.
Yes.
I needed to plug the book. And so they agreed, like it was going to be like a 45 minutes talk about my work and then 50 minutes about photographers against wildlife crime. And I thought that's perfect, works fine with me. I checked with all the photographers, the pictures I wanted to show. I would say, is it okay to show this? And so I lost the thread now. But why did I say this? Well,
it was just because it was this joy of being able to share the other photographer's work as part of the photographer's wildlife
and of course
crime.
Some of the work is it's photos of shark fins being chopped off very much for the Chinese market. So I picked the ones which I thought were really most important to show. So anyway, it was all fine, but I had to give them my final script after all the censorship, and it was translated and then just spoken out not parallel, after every sentence I say. And then afterwards, they edited the translator out. So when watch it, it's really strange. It seems somewhat incoherent. But anyway, it still works because the messages are there.
Yeah.
But of course, I was a bit naughty, and I did say a few things which they asked me specifically not to say. Because I thought, I'm on a stage,
it's your one chance.
500 people, and I could see people were, doing all their social media stuff while I was talking already. So I thought, even if it's going to be edited out afterwards, still the live audience right now can hear what I'm saying. So I put a few bits and pieces in there, which they asked me not to say. So I came off the stage and they were like, you were very naughty. You said a few things. So we're going to have to get you out of China immediately.
Really?
And I was literally saying like, well, right now, I'm leaving tomorrow. I've got my hotel. And they're like, no, you don't have your hotel anymore. We packed all your stuff. We went to your room. Here's your suitcase. You're going straight out to the station. We are taking you out. And I was like, hold on, you packed my toothbrush and pajamas. You went into my private, and they were like, oh yeah, but that's nothing. And I was like, yeah, do you know that? That's China. There was no, for them, it didn't occur to them that that's my privacy. Mm-hmm. They just went into my room and packed my stuff.
Completely different. And what does this mean for you returning?
Well, I mean, so basically, just to finish that off, what really happened is when I said, listen, are you seriously concerned about it? Or why would you like me to go immediately? And they said, listen, well, I mean, I think either it was a really good talk, they said, but either you get arrested or you get an award. There's not an awful lot in between. And I was like, shit, okay, better get quickly out there.
And are these shows shown live? Is that part of the problem?
No, it wasn't live.
Right.
They can't do it live for that very reason. Okay. I mean, most of their talks are controversial, basically. Anyway, I have to say, it was a really amazing experience to work with the people. The people on this platform were my total heroes. They were all young. They were all between, I would say, 20 and 30. And huge amounts of courage, bravery, and working like so hard, very focused. I really loved working with them, I have to say. And then, of course, they were really concerned about my safety. And, it was a really wonderful experience altogether. But then, yes, I went back, and then they didn't show this. They didn't put it out. And I was thinking, why? Was there a problem with it or whatever? But when they did put it out, it was, I think, shortly before the coronavirus. And they said within 2 hours, it was watched by 600,000 people or something. No, hold on, that's a mistake. Sorry. They said after 2 hours, it was something like 20,000. And they said, if it continues in this rate, it probably will be deleted by the authorities, because the pain threshold is usually 250 views. If you go beyond 250 views, you automatically get deleted by the authorities, because they always worried about gaining too much following on one particular thing. And then a day later, they said, right, okay, after 2 days, had 600,000 views and you are still not deleted. This is really strange. And then it went into millions, and the talk is still there now. And they say it's one of the most successful talks. But then, of course, COVID came. And they then said, no, I think the authorities might want to keep this. But at the same time, they have just brought in China out a law to say that if you criticize traditional Chinese medicine, which I very much do, because I'm talking about it's unacceptable to use wildlife for it. I myself believe in traditional Chinese medicine, but not to use animals for it. Yeah, if you want to make a plant-based, fantastic, and I've actually believe in it totally, and I've got a huge amount of respect for the tradition of this medicine, but you can't use wildlife or any other animal. I'm sorry, it's unacceptable for me, and I talk about it very openly. So I'm a bit puzzled about this, because on one hand, I feel now the authorities are embracing me and want to even work with me, but they're putting in laws saying that if you criticize traditional Chinese medicine, you can get arrested for it. I don't get it, because I am criticizing it. And I know with the bile from bears, which is like one of my biggest subjects, this is something I've been working on for a long time, and I'm campaigning against the use of bile in medicine, because it's the cruelest thing I've ever seen in my life. The bears are held captive for like 10 years, sometimes 30 years, in tiny cages where they can't move around, stand up at any time. It's absolutely horrific.
I mean, this is
the worst nightmare.
These images were the ones I think probably made me wince the most. Watching your talk and seeing the result. The disfigurement and the contorted nature of their bodies after living in these cages for so long. It's just brutal. Yeah, it's really brutal. And, I feel very haunted by it. Once you've seen it, you will never forget this, Yeah. And I was going to ask you just quickly on that. We'll come back. But, when I talked to Joanne, she talked openly about suffering from PTSD. And throughout your whole career, you've witnessed incredible animal atrocities. And is this something that's, have you woken up in the middle of the night, with images of bear bile farms or tiger farms, or, how have you what's been your coping mechanism for some of the awful things that you've seen and photographed?
I am surprisisingly well.
You're just made of good stuff, aren't you?
Not sure why. I like a party. Maybe that's what helps me. I work on a party hard. I'm very known for that. I mean, people always say to me, "Oh my God, Britta's coming next. It's going to be like another late night kind of thing." I mean, it's like I really do need to celebrate and have a party. I have a laugh a lot.
That's your antidote. You need it after seeing all the dark stuff. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on my own working. I mean, huge amounts of time. And I spent long nights, 2, 3 o'clock. Sometimes I work through the night. I always have done. I'm actually most productive during the night, I think. But when I don't work, I really have a good time. And it's not forced. It's not like, oh no, I need to have a good time. Sure. I just have a good time. I can't really actually explain it to you. But even when I go on trips that are quite serious, I mean, one of them was one trip to China where I was working with a Chinese person who was really helping me. I mean, that guy really risked his life for this project. Yeah, he really helped me. I met him actually outside China, but he was based in China, and I just approached him and said, "Listen, I totally understand if you turn me down, but would you be interested, because I need a Chinese person to get in there, basically." And he did, and I was like, "Wow!" And then I also hired somebody, as an assistant, who turned out to, was sort of my pretend husband, basically. And together, the three of us, we did this, and we strangely. I have amazingly fond memories of that trip. Mm-hmm. And we checked into like some, hostel, really rundown, shitty place. In fact, I got really ill because I drank the bloody water from the tap. They can really how stupid I am.
And what were you doing there specifically?
I'm not going to get into the details of what I was doing there, but it was.
I kind of expected, that we wouldn't be able to talk about some stuff.
But some stuff I can't. But what was really interesting is that we stayed in this really shitty place, and had really, during the day, it was depressing. It was dangerous, but we had a blast, We sat afterwards in the night in this shitty, damp, dirty room, on our beds, and just all editing and looking at the stuff we got and drinking beer. And actually, there's some footage where we filmed each other where we're literally cracking up.
Great.
It's bizarre, but, I don't know. It's sort of in me to... Because I do something so extreme and I work really, really hard, I also really, I can really switch off and really party, actually.
Yeah, oh, that's great.
And I can switch off. I do feel haunted by certain scenes and images. And yes, it doesn't make me an over happier person.
No.
It makes me doubt human beings very much. And to be honest, I'm done with that race. They can just fuck off. Humans can just fuck off as a race. I love individual people.
Bill Hicks said, "We're a virus with shoes."
Yeah. Oh, we are the worst. We are the worst. I read a lot about viruses recently. How clever they are. How clever they are. How they're surviving. That's why, of course, we've got them, because they jump. If an animal is killed, they go, "Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to jump to the murderer really quickly because that is like my new host now." And that's literally what happens. Super clever. Unfortunately, human beings are not that clever because we are killing ourselves with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I really have my guts full of humans. The way we behave on this planet, oh my God, that is an anger I really have. And you can probably see, so as much as I can be very jolly and happy and have a laugh, when I really start thinking about human beings, oh my God, I get very angry. I love individuals, so I'm not I wouldn't count myself, I'm bitter, Not at all. I've got fantastic people around me, and, I've got a really happy, great family. But as a race, Jesus, oh my God.
So what keeps you going? We've got much more awareness than ever about climate breakdown, about destruction of the rainforest, about plastic, about pollution, and it gets worse. So what motivates you to keep going and doing this work?
I have my days where I feel, do you know what, humans, just go and screw yourself. I'm done with you. Why would I put myself through this? But because I have been hurt and I have created a voice, I just can't stop it. Because I do think there can be changes. Somebody said to me the other day, history proves that history doesn't change anything. We don't learn. Humans don't learn. We're not going to learn. Mostly driven by greed, ignorance, stupidity. But there's something there where I feel, I like to think that I have converted some people and I have brought changes. And people have often said to me, God, Britta, if you didn't, show me that photo, I never would even thought about this.
Sure.
The very early stage, when I was at college and I started with the zoo thing. That was the first response, where people said, God, I never looked at zoos like that. I always thought I always liked going to the zoo, but now I don't like going there anymore because I actually understand that it's suffering, for animals and stuff like that. And this of course continues now with, that's why I think now authorities are actually keen to work with me and governments want to work because, they can see that with pictures, you can actually give a very strong message.
Yeah. And so actually this is a good time to jump back to the result of your talk in China. I don't know if actually it was a direct result of your talk, this new edition of Photographers Against Wildlife Crime, because this is ultimately your dream. But I don't know, can we talk about this now?
Yeah, no, totally. It's totally official. Yeah, it was all announced. So basically, as you know, Keith, Wilson and myself thought we're going to do one edition in English, second edition in Chinese and English, and hopefully get heard in China. That's all we wanted to do. So then we achieved that. But then what we were not prepared for was that, yes, after that talk, a publisher from China approached me saying that they watched my talk and that they were, really blown away by it and really interested in working with me on producing another book just directed for China. And they said they would like to see the books I've done and get more, get to know me better, basically. And so we did that, and we sort of started building a bit of a relationship, and then I really worked with them, for about, actually it took a long time, 2 months.
Wow.
It was quite intense.
Yeah.
And it was first like through somebody. I didn't have any direct contact to the editor, and that was quite difficult.
Yes.
And I felt I was sort of made believe that the editor wasn't speaking English or something. But then suddenly the editor appeared, and she spoke English perfectly fine. Once all the work was done, it was more like, okay, so now we can celebrate that we have got this book. We plowed through all of this. There was a lot of going around in circles and a lot of sort of things where, they said, we don't want to say that, we can't show this. Sure. And I was like, okay, but that's really important. I can let go of that, but that picture so lots is of negotiation. Really lots of negotiations. We very sadly lost Jill Robinson and Animals Asia in the process because she was worried about being part of a book actually published in China because bile bear is, the bile from the bear is used in traditional Chinese medicine to not cure COVID-19, but to help the symptoms of it. So it's been marketed as one of the main ingredients, which, for me, that's obviously so totally wrong. And because of that, we specifically need to kind of keep highlighting how cruel this is. Because a lot of people in China who buy the medicine like bile from bears don't understand how it's extracted. Yeah. They don't actually understand the cruelty involved.
But I think that's, you can apply that also here in terms of people don't know how cruel the dairy industry is, for example.
Absolutely right. 100%. You're 100% right. Yeah. So this is always the problem. It's like, give people the opportunity to see behind the scenes, and then they can make up their own mind. And to be honest, this has been very much my attitude in China anyway. I can only show you how it is, and then you decide what you want to do.
Yeah.
And so I was gutted when Jill and Animals Asia announced that they're going to pull out of the book, basically.
Right.
And when I...
Did that mean you weren't able to show any of the bear bile work?
Yeah, I had to pull all my own photos out of the book too. Yeah. But I had to totally respect what Jill said. And I think she has a point. And you know what? I have so much respect and adoration for that woman. She's one of my biggest heroes ever in my life, biggest influences. I don't want to do any harm, to her amazing work she does. So I just had to completely respect and pull out.
Yeah. And this is really, at the time of recording now, we're kind of mid-July, but you haven't seen a copy of this new version yet, have you? It's very hot.
I've only just seen the PDF for the first time yesterday. In fact, they sent it to me. But I know what's in it. Because I'm part of, okay, she's the editor, but of course, I worked very closely with her. It's almost like we co-edited. It's almost like we threw all the pictures we had in one pot and edited a whole load more because we invited extra photographers, only from China, though. We didn't include any other new photographers. Sadly so, because there are loads of amazing photographers out there I would love to work with, collaborate with. But I mean, there's only so many people you can put in a book and so many subjects, you know, and it's almost like if people come and say, oh, I see in your book you've done with Keith, you're talking about dehorning. I've also have a great dehorning story. Can I send this to you? And it's like, well, we already got the story. You just said it. We have it in the book. So of course we can't add another dehorning story because there's no point, you know, like, each photographer covers one certain area. So unless you don't bring something new to the table, which we haven't discussed yet in the book, there isn't really a way of including you. But still, I feel sad about it because there's so many amazing photographers out there. And also, I hate saying no to people because a lot of photographers contact me. And, you know, I hope there's another opportunity to do more work because I really enjoyed working with, you know, obviously Keith as a, you know, my co-editor, but also, you know, the designer who's a brilliant designer. And all the photographers who, you know, as I said, they're my heroes, and I'm so grateful that they trusted me with their work. But, you know, to come back to the Chinese edition, so basically, when I told the publisher in China that Jill was pulling out the bears and the story of the bears, they were devastated.
Yeah.
And they said, but that's one of the points we really want to make. And I was thinking to myself at the time, hold on, you're a state-owned publisher. I couldn't get my head around it, but I didn't want to ask too many questions either. And I was like, okay, listen, let's maybe find a different way then. And we did. So I rewrote a piece. Keith wrote something. We put that together. I mean, they edited that basically. And then we found other pictures. I contacted some of the photographers who are part of this book saying, have you got this? Have you got that? And anyway, so we created a new chapter basically about bears. And
then you have to kind of let yourself, it's sad, of course, you know, and it's a story that you're really passionate about, but this is a really good exercise in making it not about you, but about the bigger picture and what you can get through.
Yeah, I mean, do you know, Keith said like, oh my God, but that means, Britta, none of your bear pictures are in there. And it's like, but I don't care. I still want to kind of like talk about the bears, you know. For me, I mean, to be honest, for me, this book is really nothing to do with, you know, I'm not producing anything out of sort of because I'm egocentric or something. I'm really don't have an ego. I'm not competitive. For me, it's all about the message. I mean, otherwise I would have made this book just with my work because that's what Keith wanted. And he wanted to put the money into it, you know. And I was like, no. I wanted the book to really give a really big message across the globe. And I thought the better way of doing that is like work with other photographers. And no, because I've done that and I've enjoyed it so much, I would love to continue doing it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that was what I was going to say now. This is 3 books, 3 different editions. Amazing that you've achieved your goal of getting in China, getting a Chinese edition. What's next?
Well, you know, I mean, you know, we've achieved more than we thought we ever would.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this book was last week, it was launched in China, and I've just received the first press clippings. Of course, it's all in Chinese, but the publisher has translated some stuff for me. I mean, we've got 5 stars in China from the press in China, basically, you know. And that's and the stuff they say is like exactly, oh my God, I can't believe they really have heard us. I mean, it's like an absolute dream come true. And if you told me that 3 years ago when we did the book, I mean, people literally would say to me, so do you really believe that people will hear you with this message? And of course, in the press, I always had to say, absolutely, otherwise I wouldn't do it. To myself, I always thought, like, probably not. But I have to be positive, you know. I mean, I don't know. I think you just have to try.
Yeah.
You just have to try. I mean, I still don't know. I mean, I can't say this is a happy ending because it all depends on like where are we going with this, you know. As in, are we being heard? Is this going to bring any change? I mean, in Hong Kong, I had already some visible sort of changes, successes, so to speak, because, you know, my work was used in a certain way, to change law, for example. So I can really see something has happened there, and also some authorities who now and foundations. I'm working with a really excellent foundation there as well. I mean, they've also been really supportive and amazing, and they also actually put some money into Photographers Against Wildlife Crime. Yeah. They basically purchased the usage, you know, of some of the pictures, but that really saved our ass at some point because we were, I mean, the biggest problem really is the distribution. The distribution of a book is an absolute killer. So I was so happy that I don't have to look after the distribution in China now because, you know, do you know what? During COVID, we shipped books to China. Guess what we paid per copy?
Oh,
so we had individuals, yeah. So we weren't allowed So authorities never banned our book, the second edition, but we weren't allowed to bulk ship into China. But we were allowed to sell individual books to individuals.
I mean, I know this because, it's such a nightmare, doing my own books and, the shipping part of it. And it's something, it's what many people just don't realize that, you talk about the amount of work that goes into such a project. It always just comes down to the boring stuff as well, like, packaging, the size has got to be under 2 kilograms. And international shipping.
Yeah. I don't actually want to do that ever again, that part.
So how much did it cost? You said guess.
That really upset me. So basically, before COVID, we were selling the book to China for the same price as it sold everywhere. I didn't make, we didn't sort of make a reduction there just because it's China. And I think we paid a bit more. So maybe it was like £30 or something to ship it. But during COVID, so after the talk, I dropped the price only for Chinese people. So we sold the book in China for £20 and we paid over £100 to ship it per book. And it absolutely killed us.
Yeah.
And so when we then found out that there's a publisher who's now publishing this book, we actually stopped, I deleted the link immediately. It's like no more orders from China for like that kind of money. Yeah. And then of course some photographers occasionally would say like, so you and Keith are like, you must be sort of making money with this. And I'm like, no, we're not. It's like all we're doing is like running the post office and put all the money back into post,
it's
literally.
Unbelievable, isn't
I mean,
it?
the shipping has 3 times now almost killed the project. Yeah. 3 times. Yeah. We came to a moment, Keith and me, where we looked at each other going like, we are dead. We are dead. We have to pack up. We had at some point, we had no money even to pay for the storage anymore. We had 3 times now, we had to put our own money back into the project. We paid ourselves back our own money we put in. We did that. But that's almost the only thing, we've achieved basically. And we paid ourselves for bits and pieces like extra stuff we used to do, But the overall running, poor Keith still goes like once a week to the post office because it's been really hard because we have a warehouse in Germany. And even shipping to the UK at the moment, because of Brexit, has become really difficult.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So all UK orders are actually shipped personally by Keith, where last year, my whole house turned into a sorting office. We had books up to the ceiling, basically.
I know this.
I would run to the post office every day to do these shippings. And then the photographers would say to me, they don't know, but they would say like, so how's it going? How many books are you selling? I'm like, do you know what? Don't ask me this, like one more question, But of course, it was also because I didn't want to whine, because I was the one, none of the photographers asked me to do this. So of course I can't go back and say, do you know how much work I'm doing here for free? Of course I could never say that. What I did hint at some point was like, listen, guys, just so you know, this project doesn't make any money, like Keith and me are not being paid here.
Yeah.
But the photographers overall have all been so amazing and so supportive and so trusting. I mean, like, honestly, sometimes I had emails, I was in tears, people, like Jim Brandenburg, he actually joined the project later. He wasn't one of the first people we approached because he isn't really a photographer against wildlife crime. But of course, Jim Brandenburg's wolves have been one of my biggest influences, in my life. He's one of my heroes. But when I met him in Germany at the festival where he was a speaker, I mean, he gave us a talk which, oh my God, it blew me away. And he was almost like, I went up to speak to him. It almost felt like he was God, He was like my hero. And it was like standing in front of him, like literally going like this, Thank you. Like leaning back and forth, whatever. And he was like, what are you doing? Stop it. Anyway, and then we talked. And then, of course, I said, listen, would you be interested in second edition to be part of this? And he was like, yeah, interesting. I have to be a bit careful. I had a few experiences in China. Let me think about it, kind of thing. But then he became part, and then he's been so supportive. And he sends these emails where it's heartbreaking because he really encourages and he can see how hard we work on this.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing because when you see, websites or, on Keith's website, we see pictures of you two together on the stage. It looks very glamorous. You don't see the stacks of books, the trips to the post office, and that's the reality.
You don't see us being sweaty in the post office, and being really pissed off. It's almost like it's the most rewarding project I've done, but it's the most annoying project as well. I mean, I have cursed this project, believe me. I have cursed Keith. I would say to Keith, you know what, this is pissing me off because it's your fault. You made me do this project.
Keith, if you're listening, this is Britta's way of saying sorry.
But, I think we've done that to each other.
Yeah,
But,
my goodness.
the interesting, the amateur photographer, which is really an institution. Some people might say, oh, it's only amateur photographer, but here in the UK, it's an institution.
Yeah.
And it's still one of the most sold magazines, But, they awarded us a few months ago. When was this now? Was it in January or something? I can't remember. The Power of Photography Award, literally. The Power of Photography Award. That's right. As a project. And they changed the award for us so they can give us an award. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And of course, then on stage, I remember I came off a flight. I was at World Press Germany. And I came and I just made it on stage. And, I had this moment where I said, I hate Keith for having done this to me. And the audience was like, they thought I was totally serious. It was hilarious, actually. So we're joking about it, but we had our moments where we really thought, wow, we are screwed. The project is dead.
Yeah.
How can we find money? What are we going to do? But to be honest, then people would come, and we have had individuals, private people, with money who came and said, I want to keep this anonymous. I don't want any mention anywhere. I don't want name anywhere, but here's money to pay for your storage. And stuff. And also the last book, the second book, we had enough money to publish the book, to print the book. But because we had somebody giving us extra money, we could make a better book.
Yeah.
And we could print it at much higher quality. That's why the fabric...
You're speaking like a true photographer. You had extra money, but you didn't pay yourself. You put it into the book.
I know. Are we stupid or something? Are we stupid? And it's funny, good point, because interesting, I had people also coming and saying exactly that, saying, Britta, we want you to keep that money. Mm-hmm. And in fact, somebody gave me some money quite recently, and sure enough, I didn't use it. I put it in the bank, and then I actually distributed it.
Wow. Did you go out and get yourself something to eat and maybe buy new item of clothing? Or
not even that,
No,
Keith and me have really been very, everything on receipts and
you
our expenses we have. Of course, when we go and print this book, of course we've paid. The project paid for the hotel and the flights, of course. That'll be too much to ask.
Yeah, absolutely, it has to.
But book publishing, as you know yourself, is not a money earner. The actual printing of a book, and in fact, I was just having a discussion with a photographer the other day who came to me and said, hey, I would like to have your advice on it. Not that I tried to talk him out of it, but I said, you got to be aware because he said, oh, I've got the money. I've got £15,000, I want to spend that on the book. It's like, listen, £15,000 is nothing because yes, you can, that will pay to print the book. But the distribution and the storage is what is going to kill you. Unless you already weave that into your book price, but then you are talking, your book needs to be at least 60, 70, 80 pounds. And who spends that?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially right now.
Exactly.
People think they can sell a book for 30 pounds. Yes, you can sell it. But if you sell a book for 30 pounds, it will kill you.
Absolutely. Britta, we're going to slowly start to come to an end here.
Okay.
But there are two important things. We're kind of going to jump back a little bit because we've mentioned confiscated a few times. And this is a whole series of work, which was, wow, it was quite incredible. Shots from the confiscated, I don't know, what do you call them, offices or centers in airports where you got some pretty exclusive access. And I was, thinking about you talking about your studies and learning, the studio photography and it looked like you really applied what you learned in the studio to this project. So can you talk a little bit about the idea, how you got access, talk a little bit about some of the images. And I know that they've been used in the books as well, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was a bit like I wanted to create something different because you can see people are so used to this sort of the burning ivory. They are stunning photos and we've got some in the book, but people are so used to it. And it's almost like it doesn't really get to people anymore. So I felt like, okay, what else? What can I do with these items from wildlife in such a way that it wakes people up? And I just had this idea of, I've always been a fan of Richard Avedon and his photography, it's staged. And Albrecht Dürer, who you might not know, but he is a 16th century woodcutter, basically.
Yeah.
There's a rhino, which is very famous. If you see the woodcut, you say, oh, that. I mean, it was basically a woodcut that was produced before most people have seen a rhino. But it's still used everywhere in the world as the finest depiction of a rhino. It was actually an Indian rhinoceros. And these were sort of my influences. And I remember that I spoke to Ross Kidman Cox. And I said to her, I want to do this project with authorities where they've confiscated wildlife items. And it's like, oh, that sounds interesting. Like how? Like a sort of documentary style or like sniffer dogs, kind of this kind of thing. I'm like, no, not completely different. Sort of still lives, Richard Avedon, meeting sort of like wood cutting artists. And she was like, right, I'm not really sure if I understand what you mean. But she did at the end, because I sent her some examples and she was like, do you know what? I think I'm getting it now. I'm getting it. This is really interesting. And so I think almost before I left, she already said to me, listen, if you come back with some good material, of course I need to see it. But if you come back, I will put you in as a speaker for Widescreen. 2017, that is in Bristol. Because she said this does sound really exciting. But anyway, and that's how I really started showing the work there, because, she was very keen to kind of show it. She loved the pictures. And yeah, so, I mean, they've really, I
and where did you go first?
Well, I started here in Heathrow at the airport.
And how did you get access?
It was very difficult, but it was actually through a help of a charity who had a connection there. And they helped me to get in, but it took a long time. And because you get really checked out, nobody lets you go and see the stuff. You have to, they check you on criminal records and all this sort of stuff. But it was really interesting because, when I had to get in there, they sent me through this sort of X-ray machine stuff. I had to kind of scan everything, whatever. And then on my way out, I kind of thought, the reason why they're obviously doing this is because they want to check that if there's something else in my bag afterwards or something. But, on the way out, I kind of said, like, so are you going to scan this or whatever? And this woman literally said to me, it's quite funny. She said, listen, we've scanned your life before you came here. We know everything about you. We know that you will never touch anything and walk out with this. Don't you worry. And I was like, oh my God, that sounded a bit scary. Like, what do they know about me? And it was the same in America. But it helped that I then already had worked with authorities here to then go to America and just say, listen, that's what I've done in the UK. Here are the pictures I've taken. Would you give me access? Because basically a friend of a friend really told me that he was doing some filming for, I can't remember what it was actually, it was a Discovery or something, National Geographic maybe or something. And he said, like, well, I saw this warehouse. It blew me away. Like 1.5 confiscated wildlife items. It's crazy.
1.5. How many? 1.5 million?
Yeah, 1.5 million items. Yeah.
Wow.
And he said, you've got to go, because he knew I was doing this thing at Heathrow. So he basically said, like, you got to go. But anyway, then I applied, and it did take a while, actually.
Yeah. And so did you march in there with like a mobile studio and lights? And how did you get that kind of consistency of
I mean,
shots?
this is also just a word of warning with people, because, I was sort of naive, because I just, flew in, booked a flight, booked a hotel. But, I travel very minimalistic. I have like one pair of jeans, 5 pair of underwears.
You're getting great travel tips
5
here.
T-shirts, and that's all. And the rest is camera equipment, literally, yeah? So when I arrive, and America is not easy, So they grill you. They really grilled me. This guy grilled me. And I had, of course, literally a studio packed up in my suitcase, and I just had a tiny bag with my personal belongings and my camera bag and a tripod, yeah? And he goes to me like, so you're here to take photos then, are you? And I was like, oh yeah, but, just sort of a few landscapes, I'm staying with friends. And he said, so you're not here for like a commercial reason? Oh, no, not commercial. So what exactly are you taking photos of? And I went like, maybe some birds or something. And he said, so how come then you've got an entire photo studio in your suitcase? And I was like, oh my God, they're scanning a suitcase. I was very naive. I didn't realize that they knew what was in my suitcase. Because in the olden days, I don't know. But this is BA, and I didn't realize up till then, scans every piece of suitcase coming in. Yeah. Anyway, good that they do, I suppose. But anyway, so yeah, he was not so happy with me in my answer. But of course, he still let me go through, because I then said, listen, this is my website. I work for charities and stuff. Like, I have no interest in working here commercially at all. But anyway, it's like one of those moments where you think, oh, Britta, you idiot. But, I did really set up a studio there. And this is how these images started. And they have, received quite a lot of attention, luckily. Again, I'm very grateful that, the project was so well received. And because of that, other authorities really want to work with me now. And, I had an amazing invite to a House of Commons to hand out the book there. So somebody actually put money into it and purchased this book to hand out. I mean, they only paid what the book actually cost in production. So it wasn't money making, but it was a big...
But it's in the hands of the right people.
House of Commons press conference about the wildlife trade. I mean, you can't find yourself in better situations, And if you get invited to that, to hand out the book, I mean, this is brilliant stuff. This is where you really want to be. I mean, also really to answer, go back to the question you had earlier, like, what have you achieved really? It's like, I mean, it's very hard, but there's a lot of stuff going on, It's not, yes, we are not raising funds for a charity. We have a different way of working, So let's see where this is going to go. But I mean, it's heading in the right direction. But what is going to happen with the viruses globally is a completely different thing. And, I regret now that we ran out of time to kind of talk about it, because that of course, is a very, very important thing. And the one thing I really do want to say, though, is that I think what the world doesn't understand, people are still in denial about how it happened.
Yeah, and you know what? We can talk about it. It's fine.
I mean, basically what people don't understand is that it's our doing. And as long as we keep dragging animals towards us, this is going to continuously happening, because the viruses will jump to people. Viruses are extremely clever. They're even very clever in hiding. If you get scans, it's actually very difficult to detect scans. I mean, there are certain tests you can do or whatever, but viruses are very clever in hiding.
And this one particularly, I mean, you every day you read a different story about the rate of recovery, the damage that is done to people. Obviously, many people have died, but also the way this virus is morphing and changing, and immunity doesn't last that long. And of course, this is funny, and it's a little bit, I'm sure you're not smug about it or say I told you so, but you've been banging on the door for a long time about this, about the wildlife trade, about the problems that can encounter.
And what people don't understand is that all these viruses we have, I mean, typhoid, not typhoid, tuberculosis, sorry, I got it wrong. Tuberculosis. I mean, there's an ocean of these things we were just brought up with, regard as normal.
Yeah, SARS, swine flu. I mean, you name them, all animal.
Yeah, but even the older ones, like tuberculosis. Like, I remember when I was a child, this is all from animals. I mean, even the annual flu we get is through animals.
Yeah, through
pigs mostly. And this is really interesting, isn't it? That we have like no real interest in engaging with that, and still I feel people not. It's threatening, life-threatening. It could potentially wipe out humans on this planet. I mean, maybe that's not such a bad thing. But as humans, we should try to avoid that, right? I mean, our survival instinct should now activate ourselves to stop that. And the very simple way of stopping it is stop the close connection to wildlife. You can watch wildlife, you can follow wildlife, but don't drag it towards you. Don't cut it open. Don't consume it. And other and animals, of course. But that's up to everybody else to decide, isn't it? I mean, I prefer not to eat meat, and I'm not saying everybody needs to become a vegetarian or a vegan. I'm really not somebody who walks around saying that to people at all. Make up your own mind, but really do think about what you're consuming at the moment,
of course.
Because it's easy to point your finger to China and say, oh, they are so dirty on the markets, whatever. So where's foot and mouth and swine flu coming from, you know?
Yeah, of course.
In fact, it came not from China, So it's ongoing, the next pandemic is already in the making unless we are changing something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, destruction of wildlife, of nature, destruction of nature, habitats, global warming. It's all connected, and we need people to understand that. And I think this is really where photographers come in big time at the moment, and filmmakers, journalists. We're not just journalists, filmmakers, photographers, we are actually putting out these messages. We are making it visible for you. Yeah, we are literally saying, this is what it looks like. This is what the future can hold. So we are very important in this, at the moment. It's interesting, isn't it, that so many photographers have become speakers, but they don't actually speak about photography. So when I now get hired as a speaker, people don't ask me to talk about my photography. They ask me to talk about the legal wildlife trade.
Yeah,
we haven't
even mentioned, what camera you use or what ISOs you shoot
like
at. There we go. That's done.
Thought I'd get that in.
Yeah. Next. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean,
yeah, no, this is funny, isn't it? Because I remember the old days, especially when you're a woman, you come off stage and people go, "Oh, so what's your equipment then? How many lenses do you have?" And I always say, "1. I have 1 lens." And people go, "What? I shoot with like 3 lenses. I've got really long lenses." I'm like, "Good for you if you need it,
Yeah, I mean, there are always people that are going to be more interested in that, but I think the way it has turned in the last 8 to 15 years is that people are more interested in what photography can do rather than the camera itself.
Yeah.
And that it is more important. Of course it's more important.
Yeah.
And we all, trying to use it as a tool to varying degrees to affect change, to change hearts and minds, to educate and to inform. We are communicators, and
yeah, you're right. You're really right that people don't really talk so much about, in interviews about cameras. I mean, there's always this question they need to, like, if Nikon magazine, kind of interviews you, they don't want to mention what camera you use because I'm not using Nikon. It's like, but if it's like a magazine that covers something, it's really interesting. But I mean, I have to say, with regards to cameras, though, this is for me has been kind of quite transforming as well in what I do, of course, because when I stopped using film, it sort of actually made me a wealthier photographer in that way, because I didn't have to spend all that money on processing.
But then didn't you have to go and
scanning.
Spend all of that money on hard drives, software?
Yeah, but it's okay.
No.
I think it's sort of doable. It's doable. But then also, like, one thing with that happens sort of a couple of years ago to begin with, but very recently I had a bit of a life-changing experience with a camera, actually, because I have now found a camera, and I have no problem telling you which one it is. It's the Leica SL2. Mm-hmm. So I tried the SL and I liked it, but the SL2 really has completely convinced me and blown my mind, because it's actually a camera where you get the same sense as if you shoot analog.
Okay.
And the quality is unbelievable. It's almost like there's no pixel there, and I don't even know how they do it, actually. But the first images I processed after shooting with this camera, I was like, this was like looking at a grain rather than a pixel. Because the reason why people kept asking me, why do you still shoot on film? And my line was always because I prefer grain over a pixel, because I really do. And now with that camera, so I'm really happy. I almost feel like I've come a full circle now, because I was forever.
Finally, they've made the digital camera that can properly replicate.
I know, but
film.
I was always a little bit unhappy about it. And I had my moments where I kind of felt, I felt quite nostalgic. And I still sometimes look at these pictures, who still actually win some awards, I took on film. And I look at the negatives, and then you blow it up. And there is a beautiful quality. There is something about this quality,
without a doubt.
But
we have to remember that actually the digital revolution happening in the mid 2000s up until
oh my God,
then,
remember the first results, how crap those pictures were.
Film quality was so good.
Yeah, it was so good.
It wasn't like film died in the 70s and it only got to a certain level. It was like mid 2000s.
I think now digital photography, the quality of some cameras at least, has exceeded what a film can do.
Without
actually,
a doubt.
To be honest,
and the capabilities, particularly.
But that's not such a long time ago when that happened. I mean, we're talking literally just a few years now. I think.
I agree.
Where I started looking at, oh my God, this is better than film. Wow, and so now it's really exciting. Of course, when you process your raw files, what you can get out of it, and the quality of this particular camera is pretty mind-blowing, I have to say. So I'm very happy. That's great. I love the design of it as well. It comes in with my minimalistic
perfect
kind of
and we
style.
got to talk a little bit about cameras on the photography.
We got that in.
We did. That's awesome. Hey, it's been so nice talking to you, and also huge congratulations on getting this book, the Chinese edition. And, you're a hero of mine, and it's just an inspiration. It's amazing, a really amazing story. And I just think, my goodness, like the hard work and the effort and, hearing about the stacks of books and being, the no money, but you don't stop. And now, of course, with the uncertainty with COVID and potentially more pandemics, I mean, do you think about what you're going to be doing in 5 years or 10 years time photographically?
I dare not to think about it. I really don't know where this is going. I mean, at the moment, I'm very lucky because obviously I work in the subject that is the most important subject right now, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm in quite high demand in terms of pictures and talks, interviews, or whatever. But who knows, where this is going to go. But also, I mean, I kind of want to say, because he said, what I do is so heroic or whatever. I mean, this is also only really because of the people I work with, Sure. I mean, Photographers Against Wildlife Crime only happened, of course, because, I was working with Keith Wilson and all the other photographers. Me on my own, I never would have been able to pull off a book like this. I mean, I could have made a Britta Jaschinski book, but it never ever would have had that reach.
Sure.
But I always knew that. That's why I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But, I think in general, it's like what I'm really looking forward to is work more with other photographers and editors. I've got such good experience with this now. And this is definitely something to look forward to. I think there is a future in photography, but I think we all need to stick together, stay together, and agree that we don't do anything for free, so that people, because there used to be fees for photography and then they just got taken away, these fees need to come back. But if people keep giving their pictures away for free, then you're destroying your own work, literally,
and your own future.
So wherever I go now, whatever I do, it needs to be paid, because otherwise I can't feed myself. And I say that. And people then go and, as they always say, oh, we found the money. And I always say, oh, well done you. Well done you for finding some money for this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't feel too down about the future of photography. I think there is something we can do. But I think it's at the moment, you need to survive. You need to somehow get through this period, definitely. But I think more than ever, photography is so important. I mean, more than ever, because we really need to bring sense into these countries, authorities, politicians, decision makers. These people need to see what's going on. How else are you going to convince somebody if you can't do it visually? How are you going to do that? So, photography is really needed. It's really important. And on that note, I would like to say thanks for coming all the way. And are you going to play a game of pool now?
We definitely.
Pool table.
Britta's got a really shiny looking new pool table, which we're actually doing this podcast on. And we're going to crack right on with the game. But I want to thank you so much for inviting me down here. I still haven't got back to North London yet, but I'll send you a text to let you know I've got home safely. But it's been so lovely to talk to you. We'll put all the links to Photographers Against Wildlife Crime, obviously your social media, website, also some of these people that you talked about, the wood carver, I like all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, we're gonna let people see, what was your inspiration as well. So thank you for everything, your time, and we'll have to get you back on in the future. We'll do a 4-hour podcast.
The whole night.
Thanks so much.
With a drink.
Thanks so much, Britta.
Thank you, Matt.
Wow, we covered a lot, but that's the beauty of the podcast format, right? Listen whenever you like and for how long you like, and I hope you really enjoyed that. And I love Britta's unwavering drive, and her energy is infectious, and things are happening. Slowly as always, but moving in the right direction, and it's another great example of a positive way that photography can have an impact. Huge thanks to Britta for her time and wonderful stories. What an amazing career so far, and if you haven't already, I encourage you to look her up on Facebook, where she's most active. Check out the Photographers Against Wildlife Crime website. You can buy the book there and find out all sorts of other information, and there's other links to all of her work on my page. If you've enjoyed this, please leave a review on iTunes and on Google Play. If you're short of time, a rating would be awesome. Sharing it with your friends, family, loved ones, and together we can get these inspiring stories out there. I have some remaining places on the summer workshops on Hampstead Heath, so head over to the workshop page on my website. I've also added some new prints to the shop and some behind the scenes videos about what I've been up to photographing foxes close to home, so head over to the video page, make sure you check that out. All right, I hope you're all having a great summer, enjoying nature in your backyard and staying safe. I'll see you next month.